A&T 104 bringing you the best in anthropological news from around UK. I'm Virginia Anderson, and today we have breaking news from the NCAA. In a groundbreaking decision, the NCAA says it intends to allow college athletes to earn compensation for the first time. Previously, most student athletes under the NCAA could only receive money compensation for their position on an Olympic team wins, bowl gifts up to $550, and scholarship funds. Football, basketball, and soccer players playing on the D1 teams could also receive insurance. We must embrace change to provide the best possible experience for college athletes, says Michael Drake, the NCAA board chair who is also president of the Ohio State University. In a statement, Drake stressed the need for additional flexibility in the NCAA's approach.
We here at A&T 104 interviewed several members of the University of Kentucky student body and faculty to get a better understanding of how different people on campus felt about the idea of paying student athletes. Almost all of our interviewees had similar opinions, and that many supported such a ruling at least to some extent. One interviewee was ambivalent about such payments, and another faculty member brought up how paying athletes could replicate discriminatory practices seen in other fields such as gender or racial wage gap disparities. There were also disagreements about how much athletes should be paid or in what manner athletes should be paid as well. However, all but one supported paying athletes.
Historically, the NCAA has avoided paying athletes on college rosters, arguing that they are student athletes and not professionals, and as such shouldn't receive wage labor or individual sponsorships. The term student athlete has been in use since the 1950s by the NCAA after a lawsuit by the widow of Ray Dennison, who died from a head injury in 1955 while playing in Colorado for the Fort Lewis A&M Aggies. The NCAA won this lawsuit by arguing that since Dennison wasn't an employee, merely a student athlete, he wasn't subject to regular work laws and thus not able to receive workers' compensation.
Something many of our interviewees brought up was the massive amount of profits the NCAA, schools, and related organizations make from college sports, and that other than scholarships, players don't receive any of this profit while their coaches, nutritionists, trainers, and others do. Arguably, many of the athletes can't make good use of their scholarship funds and the degree they would acquire from their time at their chosen university because of their busy schedules.
In 2017, the NCAA received a revenue of $1.1 billion during the fiscal year. The top 10 highest paid coaches in college sports all received upwards of $6 million annually, with the highest paid coach, Mike Krzyzewski, $8.9 million. The 535 Power 5 coaches made a total of $440 million, while their institutions only handed out $426 million in scholarships to 20,000 players. Many of these players struggle financially while they play for their teams. Contrary to popular belief, most student athletes don't actually receive a full ride. According to a report by the NCPA, which is the National College Players Association, during the 2009 to 2010 academic year, the average annual scholarship shortfall out-of-pocket expenses for football series, or FBS, full scholarship athletes was $3,222. According to that same report, the percentage of FBS schools whose full athletic scholarships leave their players in poverty is 85% for those athletes who live on campus and 86% for athletes who live off campus.
Some argue that paying athletes ruins the passion and authenticity of the game, or that paying college athletes opens a Pandora's box of other possibilities for paying other levels of athletes. Tim Tebow, in an interview on ESPN in 2019, in fact argued this same point.
Tim, how do you feel about the argument made by Gene Smith from Ohio State, the athletic director there, and others on behalf of the NCAA talking about this is too difficult, it's opening a Pandora's box, we don't like it at all, even though the schools are obviously not going to be allowed to pay athletes. What do you think about their positions, their resistance?
Well, I don't know Mr. Smith's argument exactly. I haven't heard what he's had to say, but I think a little bit of that narrative is is kind of understanding it's a slippery slope, and where does it end? I totally get the side of the argument that the athletes have to be supported and taken care of in a great way, and they deserve that. But at the same way, we have to figure out as a whole for college football to be able to make it fair for all the teams, for all the universities. And I think there's a lot of people that are nervous right now because change makes people nervous. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. We have to figure out how this change is going to be able to affect college football. And I'm anxious to see what's going to happen here. So much is up in the air, and then the thing is, how does it trickle down to high school? Are we now taking the same logic and bringing it to high school players? And are we getting agents to pay for high school players? And then we're getting boosters to pay for them to come to your school? And so does pay for play in college turn to pay for play in high school and coming to your school? So I just think all those things need to be talked about. I think it's important to see both sides. On one side, we need to understand we have to take care of the athlete. They are bringing in a lot of money. They are valuable. But at the same time, we have to continue to try to be a game for that is fair for all teams, all universities. And we also have to remember, and I'm a big advocate of it, that you're a student first, a student athlete. So I think all those things we have to take into account to be able to put together a plan that works for everybody, that everyone can succeed, including the student athlete.
Some argue that by allowing schools to pay athletes, bigger schools will use this as a recruiting advantage, and that some recruits will choose schools based on solely how much they will be paid. Some also argue that the NCAA should instead implement a stay-and-learn rule to combat sudden scholarship loss in the face of an injury and the poaching of college athletes before they graduate by making graduation a stipulation of their scholarship and ability to play on the team. This would also make the point that the money one makes from playing will run out, but the degree will always be with you. And poverty post-contract for many professional players is a big problem, as evidenced by the 80% of retired NFL players who go broke in 3 years, and the 60% of NBA players who go broke in 5 years. Of course, not everyone agrees with this. Some former players have argued against these points, such as former UCLA basketball star Ed O'Bannon, who was previously involved in a lawsuit against the NCAA, and who has long argued that players should be paid. Here's an interview he did with CNN in 2019.
I assume that you like what California is trying to do. Is it enough? And what of Tim Tebow's worry that college then could become like the NFL and there won't be any difference between the two?
I don't know. I'll answer your question in reverse. I don't know that his words really would be true. I think the athletes, college athletes, will be able to profit off of their likeness and just kind of take it from there. I don't know that they would be getting paid millions of dollars. That's not what I was asking. That's not what we were asking for. Just to control your likeness. So to answer the California question, I absolutely love it. Hopefully when this bill crosses Governor Newsom's desk, he will sign it. I know Senator Skinner has been advocating for it, and so there's a lot of people behind it. California's in a really good position. They are changing the game, and from where we sit, we're extremely excited about it.
I got to just say from my own perspective that I see a slight difference between the question of should we pay athletes for their collegiate work, athleticism, and the issue of here's Ed O'Bannon. Everybody knows what he looks like. Everybody knows his number. Everybody knows his style. We're just going to use that in our game. You got to compensate someone who you're cashing in on their celebrity.
This topic of paying athletes or not is a very contentious one, as evidenced by the reaction both to California's recent laws and rulings regarding student athletes and the reaction to the NCAA's decision. Some argue that paying athletes would help combat exploitation of their labor and harm done to them, while others argue that paying them either isn't justified or won't achieve these goals. Many of our interviewees that we here at A&T 104 spoke to argued the former. However, it can be said that this debate will continue regardless of the NCAA's decision.